using the Huawei Pura X Max as my main phone for the past 18 days. In my earlier video, I already covered the design and Huawei's wide fold idea, so I won't repeat that. This time, let's talk about one thing only: what it's actually like to live with this phone every day. Big thanks to my tech partner over in China for providing this footage. I really appreciate the support in making this video happen. Hey everyone, Stella here from techiestreet. If you're into staying updated with the newest gadgets, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our latest tech content. First, the big question: can a phone this wide be used with one hand? My answer: yes and no. But honestly, isn't that true for most flagship phones today? On regular phones, one-handed movement is mostly left to right. On the Pura X Max, it's more top to bottom, and that changes everything. Because of the screen shape, reaching things like search bars or app sections is surprisingly easy. In some situations, it actually feels easier than a normal phone. Of course, the extra width means moving across the screen takes a bit more effort. Why does it feel strange? Because we've spent years training ourselves to use big slab phones. We've accepted their limitations. Yet the moment we see a foldable, suddenly one-handed use becomes a huge concern. In real life though, I don't think the Pura X Max is dramatically better or worse than a normal flagship. Typing, messaging, scrolling, it all feels natural. And in some cases, content scrolling feels even better. Huawei also added grip optimization. Apps like Phone, Lark, and WeChat adjust based on how you're holding the device. So personally, one-handed use is completely fine. It has never been a frustration for me. But here's where things get interesting: two-handed use. With regular phones, using both hands doesn't suddenly make them feel better. On the Pura X Max, it does. The outer screen feels fully under control, and once unfolded, the inner display is incredibly comfortable. Honestly, I don't see one-handed use as a weakness at all. If anything, this screen ratio makes two-handed use even more enjoyable. And it gave me an interesting thought. I think a larger version could go even wider. One-handed use probably wouldn't change much, but you'd get more screen space and maybe even a bigger battery. If Huawei doesn't do it, I have a feeling another Android brand eventually will. Now, let's talk about the experience itself. I've used the Mate X7, the smaller Pura, and I've read plenty of user feedback. One thing became very clear: some foldables make the outer screen feel more important. Others make the inner screen feel dominant. Either way, one display always feels secondary. But the Pura X Max feels different. After using it, my biggest takeaway is that both screens matter. Both get used constantly. Neither feels wasted. I kept asking myself why. Then it hit me. This screen ratio removes the need to rotate the phone in many situations. Think about it. On a regular phone, you're watching vertical content, then you find a landscape video. What do? You rotate the phone. You usually don't unfold it. That's because on many foldables, unfolding doesn't make videos feel dramatically bigger, so people don't bother opening them. But the Pura X Max works differently. The outer screen is fantastic for vertical content, then you hit a landscape video, and I almost automatically unfold the phone. Why? Because the difference is immediately obvious. The viewing experience becomes much better. That's the key change. Before, the flow was vertical screen, then horizontal screen. Now, it's vertical screen, then unfolded screen. That middle step, rotating the phone, basically disappears. The design naturally encourages you to open it. And that's what's so interesting. The outer display is perfect for vertical content, while landscape content naturally pushes you to the inner display. Both screens have a clear purpose. Both get used. That's why the Pura X Max feels like one of the most complete foldable designs I've used. It's not just good at one thing, it solves one of the biggest problems foldables have always had: the imbalance between the inner and outer screen experience. Now that we've covered the hardware and form factor, let's move on to the software and the system experience. Now, let's talk about software, because honestly, this might be the biggest surprise. The Pura X Max runs HarmonyOS 6.1 on the Kirin 9030 Pro, and compared to last year, it feels like a huge leap. If you remember the first Pura X, using HarmonyOS always came with an explanation. It was still early, still growing, and you had to accept certain limitations. This time, it feels completely different. After using HarmonyOS 6.1, I barely feel the need to make excuses anymore. Almost all my daily apps are here. Bilibili, Xiaohongshu, WeChat, Douyin, Didi, Meituan, Taobao, JD.com, and more. Day to day, I rarely run into problems. Sure, a few imperfections remain. For example, WeChat forwarding still doesn't automatically show recent contacts like on Android, but these are tiny annoyances now. That's a completely different situation from last year, when some apps simply didn't work properly. I also noticed something interesting. Many third-party apps actually feel better optimized for this wide foldable than on some Android foldables. Take Bilibili. In landscape mode, opening comments slide them in from the right while the video keeps playing clearly beside them. It feels incredibly polished. On my N6, I can't even properly read comments in full screen. The experience isn't even close. To me, this shows Huawei has moved beyond simply stretching apps onto bigger screens. Foldables are still evolving, and the brands that figure out software first will benefit the most. HarmonyOS doesn't seem focused on beating iOS or Android everywhere. Instead, Huawei feels laser-focused on delivering the best mainstream experience specifically for foldables. That said, there are still two things worth mentioning. First, software adaptation isn't perfect. Because the inner and outer screens have unusual proportions, some apps don't line up perfectly. Occasionally, content overlaps parts of the UI. Android has similar issues too, but the Pura X Max's more extreme ratio makes them happen a bit more often. Second, if you rely heavily on overseas apps like ChatGPT, Claude, and similar tools, you'll need to check compatibility yourself. That's still one of the ecosystem's tougher challenges. Speaking of HarmonyOS, I have to mention Xiaoyi again. One feature I ended up using constantly was Xiaoyi's companion AI. Just double-tap the bottom bar and it's there. It's also integrated with DeepSeek. Even if you don't regularly use overseas AI tools, Xiaoyi handles everyday tasks surprisingly well, answering questions, planning, organizing information, and general assistance. For example, I was recently in Hong Kong and needed to return to Shenzhen by high-speed rail. I wasn't sure when the last train left and was worried I'd miss it, so I asked Xiaoyi. It found the final departure time, estimated border crossing time, and even suggested backup routes with travel times and costs. Normally, I'd have to jump between several apps. Xiaoyi gave me everything in one answer. I ended up taking a taxi to the sea border crossing and then the subway for one stop. Everything worked perfectly. Now, I'm not saying Xiaoyi replaces overseas AI tools. There's still a noticeable gap. But for everyday practical use, DeepSeek is already more than good enough. Now let's talk about cameras. To be honest, I'm not a photography expert, so I won't go too deep here. But thanks to its larger body, the Pura X Max packs an imaging system that's very close to flagship level. You get a 50-megapixel ultra-light sensing main camera, a 12.5-megapixel ultra-wide, a 50-megapixel front telephoto, plus Huawei's second-generation Red Peak color sensor. Within Huawei's lineup, I'd place it roughly at Mate 80 Pro level. The main cameras are basically equivalent. Both use a 1.56-inch sensor, variable aperture from f1.4 to f4.0, and RYYB technology. Interestingly, the Pura X Max actually has a slight telephoto advantage with its 3.5 times periscope zoom. The compromise is the ultra-wide camera. The Pura X Max uses a 12.5-megapixel sensor, while the Mate 80 Pro gets a 40-megapixel RYYB ultra-wide. So one camera is similar, one is slightly better, and one is slightly weaker. Overall, camera performance sits comfortably in Mate 80 Pro territory. For me, that's more than enough for daily photography. I'll show you some samples on screen, but we won't dive deeper. Now, after the strengths, let's talk about what some people may see as a weakness: battery life. The Pura X Max has a 5300 mAh battery, but it also powers a huge 7.7-inch inner display and a 5.4-inch outer display. That's a lot to feed. With light use, getting through the day isn't difficult, but with heavy use, you'll almost certainly need a top-up sometime in the afternoon. Personally, I can accept that because Huawei's wireless fast charging makes recharging easy. What bothers me more is charging compatibility. Huawei supports only a limited range of fast charging protocols, and most of my existing power banks can't fast charge it properly. So if you're buying this phone, I'd strongly recommend getting a power bank that supports Huawei's charging standard too. And if battery life is the expected compromise, there's one more thing that feels a bit unfortunate: the name, Pura X Max. Why? Because when people hear Pura, they still think it's positioned below the Mate series, and the previous Pura X started at 7,499 yuan. So naturally, most people expect the Pura X Max to cost somewhere around 8,000 to 10,000 yuan. But then you see the actual price. The Pura X Max starts at 11,999 yuan, and the highest version reaches 12,999 yuan. At that point, it's not really an upgraded Pura X anymore. It's positioned as a premium large foldable, much closer to the Mate X7. And honestly, from day one, I felt this device probably belonged in the Mate series instead.
If this phone had launched under the Mate name, I honestly think the price would have made a lot more sense to people. But Huawei called it the Pura X Max, and that's where things get interesting. For many people, Pura X Max instantly sounds like a bigger, upgraded Pura X, so naturally they expect it to be priced that way. At the same time, people familiar with Huawei's Mate foldables expected something expensive. Then they see the actual price and think, wait, it's actually around 2,000 yuan cheaper than I thought. So depending on what you're comparing it to, you get two completely different reactions. Of course, Huawei probably had its reasons. My guess is they wanted a new form factor inside the Pura lineup, while keeping the dual flagship strategy between Pura and Mate. But from a user's perspective, the name can definitely be misleading at first. It sounds like a simple upgrade. In reality, it's an entirely different product. Thankfully, the naming doesn't seem to hurt sales. From what we're seeing, sales are already noticeably stronger than the previous generation, which is great. That's pretty much everything I wanted to say about the phone itself. But before I wrap up, there's something else I've noticed. When videos about the Pura X Max started appearing online, I kept seeing the same comments. Huawei copied Apple, or somehow beat Apple to making this kind of foldable. Honestly, even criticism should follow basic logic. Innovation is bigger than any one company. Technology moves forward because brands keep trying new ideas. That's what really matters. You can have preferences, you can like one brand more than another, but we still need to look at things objectively. If we refuse to acknowledge innovation simply because we don't like the company behind it, then it's no longer a discussion. It's just blind arguing. So I'm genuinely curious, where do you think foldable phones are heading? Now, after using the Pura X Max for 18 days, here's my final conclusion. This phone isn't perfect. It still has compromises, but it does one thing exceptionally well. For me, Huawei has finally solved the biggest long-standing problem with foldables, the imbalance between the inner and outer screens. And that's the real value of this device. Personally, I believe that within the next 1 or 2 years, this style of large foldable phone could become the mainstream direction of the entire category. I'm actually very confident about that. If you're tired of large foldables where the inner screen feels awkward, if you're tired of wasted screen space and layouts that don't fully use the hardware, then this might be the foldable that finally grabs your attention as a daily driver. And from here, the next really interesting thing is watching what Apple does. If Apple eventually adopts a similar idea, I think the entire industry will accelerate in this direction. And once that happens, all the major brands will be competing on the same stage. That's going to be very interesting to watch. All right, that's it for this video. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!